Okay, welcome back, guys. If you remember on one of my videos, I was telling you that the little 37 Ford that I'm doing in the bay there for Dan, that was an old, it's not like a magazine car, but it's a history car for us in Vancouver. I shouldn't say history, but it's a survivor, I should call it. It's a survivor, that's what it is. It's a survivor car that was around Vancouver in the 60s that Dan's dad bought, and he was driving it, and apparently Dan told me his dad found it in a field and paid $300 for it and had a Buick Nailhead in it, and he drove it for a while like that. So they're coming, Dan's on his way out here with his dad, and we're going to ask his dad a few questions, and I'm gonna see if his dad's okay with me filming him. And if he's okay with me filming him, you'll get to see him. And if he's not, I'll ask some questions, and then I'll continue this video and let you know where it goes. But yeah, because I think it's, a big part of this to me is keeping the stories alive. It's just awesome. It's just awesome. We got to keep this stuff alive because these guys ain't getting any younger, and they're the roots of hot rodding. They're the roots of all of it. Them and their dads was where it all began. You know what I mean? When guys started coming back from the war, they were stripping cars down and making them lighter and faster and just, that's where it all came. And then all of a sudden customization started coming out. And it was just, this is where it all came from. And we can't lose focus on that. Even though a lot of us guys today, we're so able because of the internet to be able to just look up how to chop this and how to do that and how to do this. It's so much easier for us than it was for them. They just had to try and go at it, and that's why some of their cars looked awesome and some were just pieced together junk, but they didn't have what we have today. So we can't lose sight of where it came from. And so, whether Dan's dad built this car or not, he bought it back then. He was driving it back then. So we got to get him on film here. Somehow we got to get him on film and ask him a few questions. Ask him where some of the cool hangouts were down in Vancouver, BC, where he went. We're going to find out. So hopefully he'll let me film him. And if he won't, well then I'll just ask him questions and tell you later. Okay, so he's going to be here soon. So I'm going to shut the camera off for a second here till he gets here. And let's hope it turns out good. And let's hope we can get him on tape. Okay guys. So Dan just showed up with his dad. And they're gone now. And we must have chatted for 2 hours, and I asked his dad if I could film him. He was kind of like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I kind of wish, though, I had put the camera somewhere where he hadn't seen it, and I'm going to because they're going to come back again some other time. The stories this man told, oh my God, they were unbelievable. I mean, you're going to laugh at me, but it just brings a tear to my eye almost because I am so in love with all these old cars and the history. It means the world to me. He was telling me that this car originally, he's seen it roaming around Surrey, Dan's 37. It was black with a white top, and he thinks it might have had white running boards at the time. And it was running around Surrey, and he ended up getting it. At the end of the day, he lived in Coquitlam, Burnaby area, and that. For you guys that don't know out there, anyway, we're Vancouver, BC. For the American folks that maybe don't understand where I'm talking, but anyway. He ended up eventually, the car, he found it later in life, and it was sitting out in the back and out in the back laying in the grass. The top was all tore up. It was getting flooded with water, had a Buick 322 nailhead in it. The black paint was still on it and all that kind of stuff. And he ended up dragging it home, and he paid $350 for the car. And he did a few things to it, and he drove it a little bit. But he said it wasn't the safest kind of car to drive around. He said, whoever had done it, it wasn't the greatest. But he knows one of the guys whose brother actually did the car. So I told him, get hold of this guy and let's get this guy on YouTube. Let's talk to these guys. So but anyway, so he didn't belong to the BC HRA. I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. He said he was one of the first members to join up, not the first, but one of the first members to join up PISRA. And PISRA is actually a car club that was started out here where I live, out in the Abbotsford, Chilliwack area. I'm in Chilliwack, of course. And but anyway, so he was a part of that club. But anyway, let's get back to the car. So he said he drove it a little bit. He'd take it out on the odd weekend when it was sunny and stuff like that and cruise around in it. But he said he didn't feel it was the safest car. So then, he said, how life is. He was into sports and stuff like that. Then, he got married and had children and work. And he was doing an apprenticeship to be a mechanic. So the car, he kind of put the car away in the garage. And it sat there until Dan got it. So it's been in the garage for like 40 some odd years, right? But he was gathering up parts for it. He's got tons of extra fenders, doors, windshield wiper motors. He kept gathering up parts of plans to do the car. So then one day, he came across a guy that was over in Maple Ridge that was an old body man. And he said, hey, because he went around to all the local shops where he was living. And back then, nobody wanted to touch the car because it was so bad. The car looked cool, but it was so bad and rusty, nobody wanted to touch it. So he got hold of this guy that lived in Maple Ridge, and he said, hey, I understand you need some mechanical work done. He wanted some work done on a big truck he had. some clutches repaired and that. So he said, how about I come out there and do some work and you do the work on my car? So this guy grabbed the car and he started working on it, and that's the actual guy. Because back then, I have to remember, we're probably talking now, I forgot to ask him what year it was, but I'm assuming he bought the car in 67, he thinks it was, and he was driving it a little bit in 67 and 68, and then basically it was off the road. So back in the 70s, you know, there was no body panels available for these cars, so he took it to this guy, and this is when this guy cut the old rotten floor out and just put that one big sheet of galvanized metal that you've seen in the car there. Put that one big sheet of galvanized metal in there as a floorboard. And anyway, the guy did a bunch of work to it for him, and then, Brian, Dan's dad, he ended up taking the car back home, and of course, it sat at home, and that's the story on this car. It just sat at home. That's its life. That's where it sat until Dan got going on it now. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a history car. I want to correct myself on this. History car is something that was in magazines that actually has proof of history. This is a survivor car. This is survivor because Brian remembers seeing this car back in the early 60s running around Surrey, BC. He remembers seeing it. It was black with a white top, like I said, and had white. He believes it had the white running boards, and it had the antenna coming off the back here that we're going to fill the hole in for because Dan wants to fill it. It was on a big rake, he said. You know, it had that California rake going on. He goes, it was just so fucking cool, he said. It was just awesome. And I just had the stories this man was just telling me. He sat here, they got here at 10:30, and it's 12:30 now, and it's supposed to be my day to work on my 58 Ford, but you know what? I would sooner sit and listen to these stories all day long than work on my stuff because, like I said, these guys aren't going to be here forever, and you just got to listen to the history, and it just, I don't know, guys. I mean, maybe you're looking at me thinking, you know what, you're just a sucker for this stuff, but it just, I'm not saying I get a tear in my eye, but you know what I'm saying. The expression I'm using, you just get a tear in your eye, like it's so sad, like it's sad, but it's happy, but I get sad because I wasn't there. I wasn't there to live in that part of the life, and that's how I lived my life. It's totally lost in the 50s and early 60s. I mean, people say, well, you'll outgrow that. Well, they fucking told me that when I was 12 years old and saw the movie American Graffiti, and John Milner was my hero. He still is to this day, even though he's just a character. And that's just it. I mean, I'll never outgrow it. If anything, I'm going to get worse and worse into it. I mean, fuck, look at my hair. I mean, just awesome. I don't care whatever happens next time. If he comes back out here, when Brian comes back out here, and they're going to bring his uncle along who's got a bunch of old cars, when they start talking their history and their stories, I'm going to have this camera set up somewhere high on a shelf where they don't know, and you're going to hear what we're talking about. It may not be the greatest visuals, but you're going to hear it. It just, you can't remake or relive this shit. A guy like myself sits out here in the shop and pretends I'm in the 50s all day long because that's the era I like. But you can pretend it and you can get as close as possible. But when it's gone, it's gone. You're not there. You know what I mean? You're just not there. But it was just incredible to hear the story on this little 37 Ford. Maybe some of you guys out there watching this video, any local boys, might know some history on this car. So it was in Surrey and roaming around, and it wound up out there in Port Coquitlam area, and that's where Brian picked it up. And like I say, he got it up and running and made it a little bit safe and drove it for a bit, and then fiddled around with it for a couple years, just on the odd Sunday. You know, he said he'd take it for a cruise, and that was it. Then it parked and never got nothing going on to it until Dan got hold of it now. And granted, some guys are going to be pissed off because Dan did put a small block Chevy in it, didn't put the nail head back in it, and you know, Dan is putting he's putting the newer leaf springs under the back here to tuck them in under more, and probably a 4-8-inch rear end. But he's not altering the body. He's not changing the body. We're fixing all the rust on it. He's keeping wide whites on it with bi-ply tires. He did go 327 with tri-power. So I mean, he's kept it looking like it's an old school car. I mean, definitely that way. So but Dan's got a wife and he's got 2 little kids, and he wants to jump in this car and he wants to drive around, and you know, he wants to know that if something breaks, he can run into a store and get it and fix it, and he wants to be safe, and there's nothing wrong with that. And but that's not what it's about. It's just about this whole car in general. Just listening to Brian. Oh my God. So let's take one look at the car here, one last look. If you guys looking at this car, it's not history, it's a survivor, and that's awesome. that it survived all these years. 1937, here we are in 2015. That's just incredible. Let's take a look. Survivor car, 1937 Ford ragtop. How many are out there? How many have got a story to them? I don't know. But this one, we're going to keep digging into this story about this car, even though it was never in the magazines and it was never history. We're going to keep digging into it because it was around. It was on the streets. It was cruising around. Antenna off the had an antenna on the back, probably had a coontail on it. Just picture it. Black with a white top. Got that California rake, you know, the running boards were upholstered in white, you know, oh my God, white walls on it. Buick Nailhead 322 with I mentioned, a LaSalle transmission in it. God, history, man, history. That's old history stuff, but a Survivor car. Just unbelievable. Just the stories. Anyway, that's it. Here at Old Time Garage, we're going to keep this car alive. We're going to get some metal work done on it because that's what Dan brought it to us for. Do all the metal work and the body work and the paint. And granted, Dan has upgraded it a little bit with a few things, but you know what? At least he didn't chop it up and clip it and put AC in it and funky tail lights and do a bunch of weird shit to it. He just upgraded some safety issues that he thought were needed. But that's all I can tell you. So hey, it's always a good time at Old Time. We'll see you next time.